Welcome back, students of Athens and gods and gladiators and empires and maybe Amazons at some point, though I do realize I don't know when we will be talking about Amazons. So today's lecture is on Aeschylus's Eumenides, his tragedy. We're going to talk about it. I just yesterday did the lecture on the funeral oration on Pericles slash Thucydides funeral oration. And I swear to you, I thought I kept it under 30 minutes. And then when I was done and saw it was 56 minutes, I was shocked and appalled. So I really am going to kind of keep this short. If it goes on for too long, I might make the next lecture optional, but let's see how it goes. I think Aeschylus's tragedy and Aristophanes' comedy are very nice kind of bookends and endings to this particular unit. So I do want to talk about them, but I do realize that this particular module might be a little content heavy. And so please note that the next module, module 3, will not be this overwhelming. So thank you for coming with me on this journey as I try to balance everything out. But we are going to try to keep this lecture relatively short, even though it's fascinating and there's so many amazing things, and I wish we could talk about it for hours. So this lecture is going to talk about the Eumenides. You have this document. It is on Canvas. I've specifically asked you only to read the last third of the tragedy. You are, of course, welcome to read the entire thing. You have it. But we are going to be focusing on the last third because that's where it really has these themes of law and religion and women in Athens. And so I'll cover what the beginning part of the play talks about. So you don't have to read it if you don't want to, but you're welcome to read it. It's fine. It is not the best Greek tragedy in the world. So let me tell you that. If you want to know what the best Greek tragedy is, come talk to me about it. We can tailor make a tragedy reading list. But this tragedy is very straightforward, though. So there's something to be said about that. It is very clear in what it's doing. So, first of all, what are Eumenides, for instance? So the Eumenides in Greek translates into the phrase kindly ones, which honestly doesn't help at all. But kindly ones is a euphemistic term for the Furies, who also in Greek are known as the Erinyes. So we call them Furies. This picture here by William Adolphe Bouguereau is of the Furies. It's these three ladies here. They are kind of earth goddesses. They're called chthonic goddesses. Their whole purpose, the reason they exist, is to punish people who have created some sort of crime related to their family. And we're going to talk about why they are part of this play. So the Furies are monstrous creatures. Like think Medusa, think, you know, gorgons. They're very, very bad. And so it's very similar. The reason the Greeks would call them Eumenides is similar to the way, if you are at all familiar with Harry Potter, in the Harry Potter universe, no one called Voldemort Voldemort, right? They were afraid to say his name because there's something about the power of the name, right? Just by saying the name, you were giving the name holder some power. And so it was a similar kind of idea with the Furies. You didn't want to call them the Furies, so you call them the kindly ones as a way of kind of keeping them away from you. So that's what a euphemistic name does. So this play, but we're going to see in this particular play, these Furies move from being Furies to kind of being actual kindly ones. So there could be a a sort of journey for them in terms of this name. They kind of grow into the name over the course of this play. And so I have many other things I can say, but I'm deliberately stopping. We're not going to talk about it. Also, so this picture, let's just pause for a minute on this picture because it is going to tell us what happened. So we might come back to this actually. So here are the Furies. They're very angry. And this guy here is Orestes. Orestes is the person who is on trial in the play that we are reading. And this woman here with the knife in her bosom is Clytemnestra, his mother. So this is kind of what the whole play is about, really. But we're going to talk about that in the next slides. So, the play itself, The Eumenides, was written by a guy called Aeschylus or Aeschylus if you are British or European. But in America, we say Aeschylus. Aeschylus was an Athenian. He is the first of our big three tragedians. So we talk about Greek tragedy a lot. Believe it or not, there was really only three tragedians that we know. Aeschylus was the first. He was the oldest. He was the most conservative. He was alive during the Persian Wars. He wrote quite a bit about the Persian Wars. After him comes Sophocles. So, for those of you who took Intro to Myth, Sophocles is the person who wrote the Oedipus plays. So, Sophocles is our middle guy. And then the last guy, the most radical tragedian, is this guy named Euripides. We are not reading any Euripides in this class. I do know my colleague, Michael Caldwell, Professor Caldwell, just gave a lecture on Euripides. He's good. He's really good. If we had more time, we could read some Euripides, but we are reading Aeschylus. This tragedy, this tragedy is one of his most famous. Like probably his most famous is called The Persians, which we're not reading, but this trilogy of plays of which we are reading one is amazing. Like it's truly an epic masterpiece, wonderful. It was performed, the entire trilogy, including the Eumenides, was performed around 458 BCE. So this is 20 years after the Persian Wars and about 30 years before the Peloponnesian Wars. So it's taking place in this brief moment of kind of triumph, prosperity, and peace within Athens. It was probably rad to be an Athenian at this point. And so this play won first prize. So the Athenians loved it. Everyone who was there was who loved it. The judges loved it. It was very beloved, which is different than the Aristophanes play we're going to be looking at next. So it's just a point of comparison. As the city Dionysia, I talked about a little bit in the festival section, happened every year in the spring. It was kind of a big deal. So yeah, so that's kind of the context of the play. The play itself, but as I kind of mentioned, it is an unusual tragedy, mainly because it very clearly, this play itself, Eumenides, focuses very clearly on politics and civic realities. It's talking about an institution in Athens that exists in Athens at the time of the play is being performed. And that's very, very unusual. Usually, tragedies kind of do not talk about what's going on in Athens, and they are usually not set in Athens. The Oedipus play, for instance, was set in Thebes, which is many tragedies are set in Thebes. So, yeah, I mean, you don't really need to worry about it too much, but if you've read any other tragedies, you may notice that this is pretty different. Also, tragedies tend to deal with mythical figures themselves, whereas this particular play is concerned with the justice system in Athens and kind of Athens' role as a city. So that's why we chose it. That's why I chose it for this class. It's explicitly interested in law, justice, and order, but it also establishes this really interesting relationship between the city and women, as we will see. Um, the funeral oration at the end, as mentioned, tells us that the best thing a woman can do for Athens is to be quiet and not be noticed. This play tells us something very different about the relationship between the city and women that I think is very interesting. I don't think enough work has been done on it, so I will definitely say I'm selfishly hoping you, the next generation of scholars, will do some work on this because it deserves some attention. So we're going to look at it and see and at least make some thoughts about it. So that's the play. The play tells a story that is part of a larger mythological story. So, as I mentioned here, once upon a time, there was a man named Agamemnon. Agamemnon is a Greek kind of king. Agamemnon is not Athenian. He is from a place called Mycenae, which is west of Athens. It's very far away. Mycenae was actually the home of kind of one of the first Greek civilizations. As actually mentioned in the foundation section of this course, people started in Mycenae and may have come over to Athens, but there was no actual real recognized connection between the Athenians and Mycenaeans at the time of this particular play. So Agamemnon is the king of Mycenae. He has a brother named Menelaus. Menelaus has a wife named Helen. Helen gets kidnapped by a guy named Paris and taken to a city called Troy. So this story may be very familiar to us. If you have seen the movie Troy, Agamemnon was played by some old British actor, but he's a big part of that movie. He's the bad guy, really, in that movie. So Agamemnon wants to help his brother. He wants to sail to Troy and get Helen back, right? So he gets a fleet together, he gets all of his soldiers together. They all kind of gather together to sail to Troy from Greece. But when they are all, there's like a military word for this, like a raid, when they all are, so just imagine all of the Greeks are ready. They're like at a Greek port. They're ready to sail to Troy, but then the water is completely flat. And these are like old Athenian ships, right? Or old Greek ships. They didn't have motors, so they needed the weather to work for them in order to sail to Troy. But at this particular moment, when they're ready to go, the ocean is flat, the wind is dead, there's nothing. And so Agamemnon did what all Greeks would have done is he asked the gods, what do I have to do to get some good weather to get to Troy? And the gods, for a variety of reasons, which we're not getting into, the gods said to Agamemnon, if you want to sail to Troy, you need to sacrifice your daughter, Iphigenia. Or Iphigenia, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Depends. But I will say Iphigenia because, again, I'm an American. So, so Agamemnon, who is here in this picture, looking very tall, he sends to his wife, Clytemnestra, he sends her a message saying, please bring Iphigenia to where I am. Now, Agamemnon can't say to Clytemnestra, because I want to sacrifice her. So he says to Clytemnestra, because I want to marry her to Achilles. So Clytemnestra brings her daughter, who she loves, to where all the Greeks were. And she brings all of this wedding stuff, this preparation stuff. She's so excited, Clytemnestra is, that her daughter is marrying this Greek hero. It is a dream. They get there to where the Greeks are. There's a whole wedding situation set up. And Iphigenia is walking down as if she's walking to an altar to get married, and she gets sacrificed at that altar. So this is that scene. This here, the picture here is from a frieze in Pompeii. Excuse me, Pompeii. It's beautiful. So here's Agamemnon. You can tell he looks a little bit dubious. He knows he's not doing the right thing. Clytemnestra is devastated. This is a terrible moment for her. And here is Iphigenia being carried off to her death, and then there's some other kind of things. So, and let me just emphasize, none of this is in the play that we're reading. So, this is all just kind of background information. Agamemnon sails to Troy, Clytemnestra goes home to Mycenae, and 10 years go by. That's the Trojan War. So then, very exciting, the Trojan War ends and Agamemnon goes home. He not only thinks that Clytemnestra surely has forgotten about the sacrifice of her daughter, but he also thinks Clytemnestra is going to be super chill about the fact that he, Agamemnon, is bringing home a sex slave in the form of this woman, Cassandra. I just realized that has nothing to do with this story, so don't worry about Cassandra. If you would like to talk about this, we can. And this is when the Agamemnon play starts. The Agamemnon is the first of the trilogy in which the Eumenides is. So the three plays are called the Agamemnon first, the Libation Bearer second, and the Eumenides third. We are just reading the Eumenides. But in the Agamemnon, Agamemnon comes home. Clytemnestra greets him. She sees this woman, Cassandra, but mainly Clytemnestra is still really pissed off about her daughter, and she thinks it's absolutely totally fine for her to kill Agamemnon, which is exactly what she does as soon as she gets the chance. And pardon me, you can fast forward through this if you want. Just thank you for indulging me in advance. This is Clytemnestra's description of her murder of Agamemnon, which is one of the greatest passages in Greek tragedy ever. This is of course in English, so it's not as good as the Greek, but it's still a pretty good translation. So he goes down, and the life is bursting out of him. Great sprays of blood, and the murderous shower wounds me, dyes me black, and I revel like the earth when the spring rains come down, the blessed gifts of God, and the green spear splits the sheath and rips to birth in glory. I mean, it's amazing. Like it is such a good scene. You just have to imagine Clytemnestra coming out covered in blood, so happy, so proud of herself. And that's like how the play ends. So that's how the Agamemnon ends, with Clytemnestra murdering her husband and getting away with it because she's the most powerful person. She's got another husband now. She's doing great. So Clytemnestra kills Agamemnon. The Agamemnon ends. Then, in the Libation Bearers, the second play, Orestes, who is the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, and who had not been living with Clytemnestra for a long time, comes back and he kills Clytemnestra himself. There's like three or four plays about this. It's a very controversial topic. There's this other woman involved named Electra, who everybody hates, rightfully so. But at the end of the libation bearers, Orestes kills his mother, and he does so because he feels like that's his job to avenge his father. So people are kind of working on these understanding of crimes, of family crimes, and doing what they think they have to do. Clytemnestra feels like she has to kill Agamemnon because he shamed her and her family. Orestes feels like he has to kill his mother because his mother killed his father. Also, Apollo, the god Apollo, told Orestes that he had to kill his mother and that it would be fine if he killed his mother. So Orestes kills his mother. How he does so, it's a little bit controversial, kind of ultimately boring, but Orestes kills Clytemnestra. Even though Apollo told Orestes that it was okay, the Furies still have their job to do. They don't care about Apollo. They don't follow Apollo. They're older than Apollo. So when the Furies find out that Orestes killed his mother, they come after him. They start chasing him. There's a lot of interesting work and speculation as to kind of the mechanism of the Furies' rage, like how they force people to die, whether they kill them themselves. My one of the most interesting theories, and I'm pretty sure, to be honest, that I got this from The Secret History. If you've read The Secret History by Donna Tartt, I think the idea in that book was that the Furies would just turn up your conscience, like your inner dialogue, until you went crazy and killed yourself. So it's a little bit controversial. We are not quite sure. But in the Libation Bearers, they just start chasing him. And then when we meet Orestes in our play, the Eumenides, the Furies are just chasing Orestes, like all over the place. So the Furies come to Orestes, they chase him to Athens. And in the beginning of our play, the Eumenides, they chase him into a shrine to Athena, which is, of course, the Parthenon. So they chase him there, where he is like at the feet of a statue of Athena, and he is calling upon Athena for help. Apollo cannot help him, which is weird. So Orestes is calling upon Athena. And so the part of the play that we start reading is when Athena comes and she sees Orestes at her shrine and she sees the Furies and she's like, who are these disgusting women? Like she has no idea. And they explain to her what's going on. And she says, the only thing that can solve this is a law court. So she starts to use or implements or whatever the law courts that were so famous in Athens that we talked about in our lecture on politics or whatever in Athens. So Athena comes in. She doesn't know anything about the family curse. She is not at all involved with Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. She is both a goddess, as of course, but in this place, she's a civic figure. She is very concerned about the situation in Athens, and she wants to help as much as she can, but she doesn't want anything to redound to Athens' disadvantage. So she's just like, well, we have to figure this out because as long as these goddesses and the sky are here in Athens, Athens cannot thrive. And just a little more dialogue or sorry, history. What is this called? Background before we get into it. In case you didn't take the Intro to Myth class, Athena is this goddess who kind of straddles the world between men and women. She is obviously a woman, but she was not born from a woman. She was born from Zeus's head. And the reason for that, well, let's just leave it at that. She was born from Zeus. So she didn't come out of a woman. She herself is a virgin goddess, as you know from the story of the foundation of Athens. When some guy tried to molest her, she fought him off and then shook his sperm off of her off of her rope, hence Athens. So though she is a woman, she has the body of the woman, the form of a woman. She also kind of inhabits this very male sphere. You notice here she's got a helmet, just like Pericles. Athena is the goddess of war, and she's a tough lady. Like, and we will see how that kind of games out. So she really straddles the line between men and women in this play. So here is where we were supposed to start reading, somewhere around here. So when Athena realizes what's going on, she recognizes that she cannot use her divine power to do anything. And that's a really interesting element of this play. What we will see again and again is that the civic structure of Athens, the rules of Athens, the laws of Athens are looked to rather than any sort of divine action. So yeah, so the gods don't intervene using God's stuff. They just kind of reify and establish and support human systems. So that's a really interesting element of this play. And not just human systems in general, but like the Athenian political situation in particular. And we see this when Athena says this, the situation with Orestes and the Furies, is a serious matter, too complex for any mortal man to think of judging, which is a little ironic. It's not right, even for me, a divine figure, to adjudicate such cases where murder done in passion merits passionate, swift punishment. But since the judgment now devolves on me, I'll appoint human judges of this murder, a tribunal bound by oath. I'll set it up to last forever. So Athena's saying in a situation like this, where a murder done in passion, like the one Clytemnestra did, merits swift punishment, which is what Orestes did to Clytemnestra, this is something that's so impossible to judge. The justice of the situation is so impossible to grasp that not a god or a man can decide. She goes with what is basically the next best thing, which is human judges. So she's basically saying there are some things that are absolutely unsolvable. When you get into a situation like that, it is up to kind of group decision making to go with an appropriate course of action. The next best thing is group decision making, is democracy. So it's a really interesting kind of support of the Athenian democratic system as well as the judicial system. So, and so we have this kind of glorification of democracy, and in particular, the democracy in Athens. Like it is not, it is very important that this tragedy is set in Athens and not somewhere else. All of the prior action has occurred in other cities, either in Mycenae or in Delphi, which is where Apollo lives, and Orestes was off in the countryside. So none of those cities or country have the kind of structure required, but Athens does. And this is what Pericles said, right? Athens is the model for all the other Greek cities. And we see that being represented in this particular play. The problem, though, is these Furies. And Athena is very worried about the Furies. And she acknowledges these Furies also have their function. This idea of bloodlust, of kind of this earthy, chthonic punishment, that is something that people respect. The fear that the Furies promote in people is something that Athena thinks is valuable. And she says that's something we cannot just set aside. We just cannot set aside. So if they, the Furies, fail to triumph in this case, they'll spread their poisonous resentment. It will seep underground, infecting us, bring perpetual disease upon our land, something we can't bear. So the problem as Athena sees it is these men that she's going to choose may find a rational decision that appeals in some part to most people. But Athena's worried that the sense of injustice, this kind of primal, illogical, um, scared sense, will persist even in the face of a rational decision. And that fear, that anger will infect all of the citizens and weaken the city, which is built upon rational decision making. So she's worried about it, and we're going to see how she resolves it at the end of the play. So the Furies are in the play. They are the chorus. So when you read through the play, anytime it says chorus, that is the Furies. The chorus in Greek tragedies is always a bit bonkers. It's usually just what the hell is going on. And this play is no exception. And you can read what they say. It's just, I didn't even excerpt it. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what a lot of this is doing. I think it's mainly to set the vibe of the play, which is like crazy, like mad, really mad. But the Furies do make this really interesting comparison where they say that the man and the city are the same. But where is there a man or a city, both alike in this regard, who still respect what's just without a heart attuned to fear? So, what they're saying here is that a man does the right thing because he's afraid. He's afraid of getting in trouble with the gods. A city also, the Furies say, are afraid. They do the right thing because they're afraid of getting in trouble with the gods. And so this contradicts what we see Pericles say in the funeral oration. In the funeral oration, Pericles says Athens does the right thing not because they're afraid, but because they embrace their freedom, they embrace the positive aspects of the city. They know what's good and they recognize the rewards of what is good. So how do we square that circle? How do we make these two things agree with each other? I think is what's being asked here. How does the city function without fear, but motivated towards the good? Is that possible, given, as the play would argue, that man is sometimes fundamentally irrational? How does a rational democracy function when built upon occasionally irrational people? So I think that's one of the things that's at stake here, and we're going to kind of see how it plays out. So then in the play, we have all of this action. Athena establishes a jury, she introduces collective decision making, and in that jury, we're moving justice from family to community. So prior, all of the justice that had been happening in this play was in the context of the family of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. But now that it's at an impasse, we see the community taking over. The irrational madness of the family is being kind of adjudicated and moderated by the community. And Athena and the trial, just like in Athens, there is an acceptable level of disagreement. So it's not that everybody has to agree that this is the 100% right thing. It's that the majority has to agree that this is the right thing. And the minority has to abide by that. That is how the city works. By recognizing that not everyone's going to agree all of the time, but that we agree to disagree, right? So this is a unique feature of Athens and democracy, etc. So then the trial happens. Apollo comes and he argues for Orestes. It's very fine, just like Apollo, very average at all times. The Furies come and they argue for the blood justice that they've been fighting for, and it is, of course, mildly deranged, but very interesting. We see both sides given a voice. And then what happens? The vote is split. 50-50. 50 people, 50% of the people think the Furies are right, 50% of the people think that Apollo is right. And so then Athena comes in. Athena is the vote breaker. And here's what she says. So she says to you, citizens of Athens, you judges at the first trial ever held for murder, hear what I decree. Now and forever, this court of judges will be set up here to serve Aegeus's people. That's the Athenians. Aegeus was one of the first Athenians. This place, this Mount of Ares, is where, there they are, is where Amazons, yes. This place, the Mount of Ares, also known as the Areopagus, which we talked about a little, is where the Amazons once marched in force, enraged at Theseus. Here they pitched their tents. Then they built a new city on the heights with lofty walls to match his own, making a sacrifice to Ares, the god of war, from whom this rock derives its name, the Mount of Ares. I'm so glad that we have this. So Athena here is not giving an alternative version of the city of Athens. That's not what we're saying. She is talking specifically about a place called the Areopagus, which is where murder trials were held in Athens from the time of Draco, so 650 or something. So she's explaining why this one particular spot in Athens is the appropriate place to have these trials for murder. And it is because the Amazons, who were mad at Theseus, who was an Athenian hero, created a little city there. And so this is really interesting. And again, we can't get into it too much because we just don't have time and I don't want to go on for an hour. But the Amazons, in case you don't know, are all women, right? They're this mythical race of very tall women. There's a lot of stuff going on with their breasts that we're not going to talk about. But we see women coming to the Areopagus and building a new city and worshiping Ares, the god of war. So you have Athens being founded on the Acropolis, which is not the Areopagus, and then this other little city of women being built on the Areopagus. And that is where murder trials are taking place. Now, I wish this were a literature course and we can talk about this forever. Maybe this will be a fun discussion post, but something to think about. But let's not get distracted. Here is a picture of the Areopagus. It is not super impressive right now. Somewhere that we're going to see another picture where there's like a little platform or something. But it's basically everyone just got together. I'm sure it looked better, 2,500 years ago. But this is it. So I just want to emphasize this is the Areopagus that we're talking about. This is where the Amazons built their city. This is not the Acropolis. Completely different place. So from this hill, reverence and terror, two kindred rulers of my citizens, will guarantee they don't commit injustice by day or night unless the citizens pollute the laws with evil innovations. Once limpid waters are stained with mud, you'll never find a drink. My people avoid both anarchy and tyranny. So Athena is saying that she's establishing this law court and hence basically establishing the legal system of Athens. And the legal system will function by playing upon both reverence, which is respect for the law, and terror, which is fear of the law. And as long as the Athenian citizens follow the rules and don't change the laws to make them bad, everything will be fine. But she warns them democracy, the legal system, is fragile. Once limpid waters, clear waters are stained, they cannot be unstained. So she tells her people of the democratic city of Athens to avoid both anarchy and tyranny. Like following the path of democracy is a narrow road that requires work, it requires respect, it requires fear, and it requires just kind of like honest adherence to the spirit as well as the letter of the law. And if you do that, everything's going to be great. Yes. And here she's talking about what the Furies do. As for terror, don't banish it completely from the city. And she's going to show how that happens, right? What mortal man is truly righteous without being afraid? So, though the city is built on the logical rules of democracy and law, there still is a place for fear. Those who sense the fear revere what's right. With citizens like these, your country and your city will be safe, stronger than anything possessed by men in Pelops' country or in Scythia. So, Pelops' country, this is the Peloponnese, this is basically Sparta, this is the west. And Scythia is in the north and the east. So, she's basically again saying Athens is amazing. It's functioning as a democracy, but it still maintains some fear. And we're going to, again, talk about that at the end. So the jury verdict was 50-50. Athena is casting the deciding vote. It's now my task to give my final verdict, and I award my ballot to Orestes. So she sides with Orestes and Apollo against the Furies. No mother gave me birth. That's why in everything but marriage, I support the man with all my heart, a true child of my father, Zeus. So again, we can't talk about this, but I want to. We see the thing is kind of it's a dichotomy on gender lines, kind of. So Orestes and Apollo and democracy and reason, these are all coded as masculine, and Athena is siding with that side. Whereas the Furies, the blood vengeance, the family, the fear, that is coded as feminine, and that is the loser here. That's what Athena sides against, kind of. Thus, that woman's death, Clytemnestra's death, I won't consider more significant. She killed her husband, guardian of their home. If the votes are equal, Orestes wins. So Orestes wins. We really don't talk about Orestes ever again. He just kind of goes away. He's gone, which is fitting because he's very boring. Okay, so here we are. We're at the almost the end of the play. Orestes and Apollo have won. They are gone. We don't talk to them again. So now we just have Athena on stage. We have the Furies on stage. So women everywhere. Athena looks at the Furies, and the Furies are, believe it or not, furious. They're real mad. And they're just like, we are going to burn this place down. And Athena uses the power of persuasion. She calls attention to this to convince them to not poison her city. But she has this great plan. She recognizes the power of fear. And she's like, why don't you just live here? That's her plan. She says, "Let me persuade you not to spurn this trial. You've not been beaten. The votes were fair. The numbers equal. No disgrace to you." So she's appealing to their logic. But we received clear evidence from Zeus, which is not true. So she's just kind of, being a lawyer. She's just making stuff up. Um, so she's trying to persuade them. It takes a very, and so speech replaces force. She is appealing to the logic of these illogical creatures. Um, the Furies take a long time to be persuaded, and you can see that you did the reading. They keep replacing themselves, they keep repeating themselves over and over again and saying, this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right. And then finally, they're just like, all right, like, fine. So they are convinced by Athena. And they say, yeah, okay, how about we just live here? We'll live in the city. People will pay homage to us, and that'll be fine. So that's kind of how it resolves. At the end of the day, the male side with logic, etc., won, and the women lost, but they're like, okay, we're going to go along with this because we still remain a fundamental part of the city. So the things we associate with Athens, democracy, reason, law courts, majority rule, that is all fine. That is there. But the play emphasizes that the other side, the fear, the chthonic rituals, the old bloodlust, that's still a part of the city. And that's actually what the play ends on. And that's what I think is super interesting is like we can look at Athens and see all of the good the like the law courts, we can see the laws, we can see the democracy. What we don't pay attention to as much is this kind of undercurrent, a female rageful fear. But this play thought it was so important that it actually ends with that. So it's a little bit kind of tamed for a little while, but it's omnipresent. It's still there at all times. So we have this quote, "You see now how these furies seek their way with well-intentioned words. I can predict these terrifying faces will provide my citizens with all sorts of benefits." So the furies, this ancient angry force, is part of Athens' success. And Athena tells her citizens, worship them forever. Then you'll keep your land and city on the path of justice and everything you do attaining glory. So it's not the laws, it's not the democracy that necessarily makes Athens great, so to speak, but it's the worship of the force and the power and the fear of the Furies. Here's just Athena's little love letter to Athens. I love these righteous men the way a gardener loves his growing plants, this race now free of grief. These things are yours to give. For my part, I'll see the city wins triumphal fame in deadly wars where men seek glory, so all men celebrate victorious Athens. So Athena's taking responsibility for the kind of imperial successes of Athens. She's not making sure democracy runs great. She's just like, you know what? I love you guys. You're amazing. And I will make sure that when you go to attack the Spartans 30 years from now, you'll win, right? And they do. They win for a really long time before they start losing. And then the play ends with women. So then move on with the torches. So this group, our fellow residents, can show the love they bear this land, and for all time to come, bring our city strength and good fortune. So the play ends with a group of women, or men dressed as women, but anyhow, people presenting as women, leading a procession off the stage saying and Athena and the chorus saying, these women are fellow residents. They are participants in Athens. They can love the land of Athens just like a man can. And they, the women, bring our city strength and great good fortune. So I love this because it's such a nice refutation of Pericles. Pericles is like, women, the best you can do is nothing. And here we see acknowledgement by Aeschylus, who's, a conservative playwright, that though the city, part of it is what the men do in public forums. Another huge significant part of the city is all of the kind of unseen labor that women are doing to keep the city like on its path. So I'm going to leave it at that. Actually, I could really go on. for a very long time, but I promised I was going to keep this short. I'm going to let you guys think about it and tell me what you think. I mean, is this crazy? What was your thoughts about Athenian women upon finishing the play, etc.? So, next time we are going to read The Clouds, which there are no women anywhere. So, I hope you enjoy this lecture because they're not coming back. But it's a weird little play. We'll talk about it. It's fine. I'm not gonna lie. I've thought about taking it out of the curriculum for weeks now, but I think we're gonna do it. We'll see how it goes. So, and it will be a very short lecture because I don't want to talk about it for hours. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for your hard work. As always, if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to talk to you, and I will see you next time.